The night sky above Valanthos Prime burned with falling debris. Pieces of the cargo ship Wandering Star scattered across the atmosphere like dying fireflies, leaving trails of orange and white against the purple darkness. Most of the wreckage burned up before it touched the ground. Most of it. But not all. A single escape pod punched through the clouds and slammed into the frozen forest of the Northern Territories. It carved a long, ugly scar through the ancient trees before finally stopping against a wall of ice and rock. Steam rose from the hot metal. The forest fell silent, as if holding its breath. Inside the pod, Daniel Cole opened his eyes. Everything hurt. His head was bleeding. His left arm felt wrong, twisted in a way that made him sick to look at. The emergency lights flickered red, casting strange shadows on the walls. He could hear alarms beeping somewhere, but they sounded far away, like sounds from a dream. He remembered the attack. The raiders had come out of nowhere, their ships tearing through the Wandering Star like wolves through paper. Daniel had been loading cargo in the lower decks when the first explosion rocked the ship. He remembered running. He remembered screaming. He remembered someone pushing him into an escape pod and hitting the launch button. He did not remember anything after that. Daniel forced himself to move. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. But he had survived too much to die in a metal box on some alien world. He found the emergency release and pulled it. The pod door fell open with a heavy clang, and cold air rushed in like a living thing. The cold was beyond anything Daniel had ever felt. It cut through his thin work clothes like a knife. His breath turned to white mist the moment it left his lips. He stumbled out of the pod and fell to his knees in the snow, gasping. He was alone. The forest stretched around him in all directions, dark and endless. The trees were not like earth trees. They were tall and thin, with bark that shimmered like glass and leaves that glowed faint blue in the darkness. Everything was covered in snow, so white it seemed to glow. Daniel had no supplies, no weapons, no way to call for help. He knew nothing about this planet except its name, which he had seen on navigation charts during his time on the ship. Valanthos Prime, the heart of the Valanthi Empire. He knew about the Valanthi. Everyone in human space knew about them. They were an ancient race, proud and powerful, with skin that shimmered like pearls and eyes that burned like gold. They ruled over 100 worlds and considered themselves the most civilized beings in the galaxy. They also considered humans to be primitive, violent, and dangerous. If the Valanthi found him, they would probably kill him, or worse, put him in a prison and forget about him forever. Daniel pulled himself to his feet. He had to move. Standing still meant freezing to death. He picked a direction and started walking. The hours blurred together. Daniel lost track of time. He stumbled through the snow, falling and rising again. The cold ate at him from the outside, and hunger ate at him from the inside. He began to see things that were not there. His mother, standing between the trees, calling his name. His old dog, running through the snow ahead of him. He knew he was dying. And then he heard the crying. It was a small sound, almost lost in the wind. A thin, high wail that rose and fell like a wounded animal. Daniel stopped and listened. The sound came again, somewhere to his left. He should have kept walking. He was already dying. Whatever was making that sound was not his problem. But Daniel Cole had never been good at leaving things alone. His mother used to say he had too much heart for his own good. He followed the sound. He found her beneath a twisted tree, half buried in snow. She was so small, a tiny creature wrapped in thin cloth, her skin pale lavender, her eyes squeezed shut as she screamed. She could not have been more than a year old in human terms, maybe 2. A Valanthi child. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. She was clearly abandoned. No parent would leave a baby alone in this frozen wasteland. Someone had put her here to die. The cold part of his brain told him to walk away. She was not human. She was Valanthi. Her people would kill him if they found him. Saving her would only make his own survival harder. But the rest of his brain, the part that remembered his mother's voice and his grandmother's songs, could not leave a baby to die in the snow. He knelt down and picked her up. She was so light, like holding a bundle of feathers. Her skin was cold, almost as cold as the snow around them. Her crying faded to a weak whimper as he pulled her against his chest, trying to share what little warmth he had left. Daniel looked into her face. Her eyes opened just a little. They were silver. Not gold like the Valanthi nobles he had seen in pictures. Silver, like moonlight on water. Something in those eyes grabbed his heart and refused to let go. Daniel wrapped her in his jacket. It was not much, but it was something. Then he started walking again, faster now, driven by something more than just survival. He had a purpose. He had someone to protect. The wind howled around them. The snow fell harder. The darkness pressed in from all sides. But Daniel Cole kept walking. He did not know that the child in his arms was the firstborn daughter of Empress Falith, ruler of the Valanthi Empire. He did not know that she had been taken from her mother's arms and left to die because her silver eyes were considered a sign of bad luck. He did not know that her disappearance had shattered the Empress's heart and sparked a secret search that would last for years. He knew only that she was small and cold and needed him, and that was enough. They walked through the night together, the human and the alien child, 2 souls thrown together by chance and disaster. Somewhere along the way, the child stopped crying. She pressed her face against Daniel's chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, despite everything. She did not understand the words he whispered to her as they walked. She did not know that he was making a promise, speaking to her as he would speak to his own daughter. But she felt safe. For the first time in her short life, she felt safe. And deep in her tiny heart, she began to love him. Daniel found the village on the 3rd day. He was barely alive when he stumbled out of the forest. His feet were numb. His lips were cracked and bleeding. He had not eaten anything in days, and he had given most of his water to the baby, letting her suck on wet cloth because he had nothing else to offer. The village was small, maybe 30 buildings made of dark stone and glowing crystal. The Valanthi who lived there were not like the nobles in the pictures. They were simple people with rough clothes and tired faces. Farmers, workers, the forgotten people of the empire, living far from the golden cities of the south. They saw Daniel coming. They saw the child in his arms. They gathered at the edge of the village and watched with wide, suspicious eyes. Daniel collapsed in the snow before them. He woke up 3 days later in a warm room. A fire burned in the corner. The baby was sleeping beside him, wrapped in soft blankets, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. An old Valanthi woman sat nearby, watching him. Her skin was dark purple, weathered by years of cold wind. Her eyes were a dull orange, not the bright gold of nobility. She spoke to him in a language he did not understand. Daniel shook his head. She tried again, slower this time. It took weeks before they could really talk to each other. Daniel learned their language piece by piece, word by word. In return, he taught them a few words of his own language. The villagers were curious about him. They had never seen a human before. Some were afraid of him. Others found him strange and interesting. But all of them wondered about the child. Daniel told them the truth. He had found her in the forest, abandoned and dying. He did not know who she was or where she came from. He only knew that someone had left her to die, and he could not let that happen. The old woman, whose name was Velka, studied the baby's silver eyes for a long time. Then she said something that Daniel did not fully understand. Something about stars and shadows and bad omens. Daniel did not care about omens. He cared about the child. He named her Lyra, after his grandmother who had died when he was young. It was a good name, a strong name. The villagers let them stay. Daniel worked to earn his place. He fixed machines that had been broken for years. He helped build new walls against the winter storms. He hunted in the forest and brought back meat for everyone to share. Slowly, the fear in the villagers' eyes turned to respect. And Lyra grew. She grew fast, faster than a human child would. By the time a year had passed, she was walking and talking, speaking both Volanthi and the bits of English that Daniel taught her. She followed him everywhere, her small hand holding tight to his fingers, her silver eyes watching everything he did. She called him Papa. The first time she said it, Daniel had to turn away so she would not see him cry. The years passed like water flowing down a river. Daniel built them a small house at the edge of the village. He made furniture from wood and crystal. He carved toys for Lyra and told her stories at night, stories about Earth and humans and a blue sky she had never seen. Lyra loved the stories. She made him tell them again and again, until she knew every word by heart. She dreamed of oceans and mountains and green forests full of animals with strange names. She dreamed of the place her papa came from, and she wished she could see it someday. She did not think of herself as Volanthi. She did not think of herself as human. She was simply Lyra, daughter of Daniel, and that was enough. When Lyra was 5, she asked Daniel why her eyes were different from the other children in the village. Daniel knelt down and took her face in his hands. He looked into those silver eyes, bright as stars, and he smiled. He told her that her eyes were special. He told her that they were the most beautiful eyes in the whole universe. He told her that anyone who said different was wrong, and she should never let anyone make her feel bad about who she was. Lyra believed him. She believed everything her papa told her. When Lyra was 8, she caught a fever that nearly killed her. Daniel stayed by her bed for 6 days and 6 nights without sleeping. He held her hand and talked to her, telling her stories and singing songs his mother had sung to him when he was small. On the 7th day, the fever broke. Lyra opened her eyes and smiled at him. Daniel swore he would never let anything hurt her again. When Lyra was 11, the scouts came. They arrived on a cold morning, their ships landing at the edge of the village like metal insects. They wore the black and gold armor of the Imperial Guard. They asked questions about strangers and runaways and children with silver eyes. Daniel watched them from the window of his house. His heart beat fast and hard in his chest. Velka came to him that night. She told him that the scouts were looking for something important, something valuable. She told him that the Empire never forgot and never forgave. She told him that if he stayed, they would find him, and they would take Lyra. Daniel did not sleep that night. He sat by Lyra's bed and watched her dream, her silver hair spread across the pillow like moonlight. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, he told Lyra they were going on a journey. She was excited. She loved adventures. She packed her few belongings and followed him into the forest without question. They walked for 3 days. Daniel said little, but Lyra did not mind. She was happy to be with her papa, away from the village and the strange soldiers who had frightened everyone. On the 3rd day, they reached the sanctuary temple. It was an ancient place, built into the side of a mountain, its walls carved with symbols older than the empire itself. The priests who lived there were sworn to protect any who sought shelter. No one, not even the empress herself, could take someone from the sanctuary by force. Daniel led Lyra to the great doors. He knelt down in front of her and took her hands. His eyes were wet. He told her that she had to stay here for a while. He told her that the priests would keep her safe. He told her that he would come back for her as soon as he could. Lyra did not understand. She started to cry. She begged him not to leave her. Daniel pulled her close and held her tight. He could feel her small body shaking against his. He told her that he loved her. He told her that he would always love her. He told her that no matter what happened, she was his daughter, and nothing in the universe could change that. Then he stood up and walked away. He did not look back. He could not. If he looked back, he would never be able to leave. Lyra screamed his name. She tried to run after him, but the priests held her back, their arms gentle but firm. Daniel disappeared into the forest. 3 days later, the Imperial scouts found him. He did not fight. He did not run. He let them take him, because every moment they spent chasing him was a moment they were not looking for Lyra. He had kept his promise. He had kept her safe. The priests of the sanctuary temple had many rules. They kept records of everyone who came to them for protection. They took samples of blood and skin, checking each person against the great database that held the names and faces of every Velanthi in the Empire. It was a simple routine. They had done it thousands of times before. But when they tested Lyra's blood, the routine ended. The head priest, an old male with pale blue skin and clouded eyes, looked at the results 3 times. He made his assistants run the test again and again. Each time, the answer was the same. The child with silver eyes was not some farmer's unwanted daughter. She was not a beggar, or an orphan, or a criminal in hiding. She was Princess Lyra, firstborn daughter of Empress Valith, ruler of the Velanthi Empire. The child who had been thrown away 12 years ago. The child who had been left to die in the frozen north. The child who the Empire had spent over a decade searching for in secret. She was alive. She was here. And she had been raised by a human. The message went out that same night. Within hours, Imperial ships filled the sky above the temple like a swarm of golden insects. Soldiers surrounded the ancient walls. Officials in flowing robes arrived with papers and demands and questions that never stopped. Lyra did not understand what was happening. She sat in a small room, alone and afraid, while strangers talked about her in languages she could barely follow. They kept calling her princess. They kept bowing to her. They kept looking at her silver eyes with expressions she could not read. She asked for her papa. No one answered. She asked again, louder. They looked away. She screamed his name until her voice broke. Still, no one answered. They put her on a ship and flew her to the capital. The journey took 3 days. Lyra spent most of it staring out the window, watching the stars blur past, thinking about Daniel. Where was he? Was he looking for her? Would he be angry that she had not waited for him at the temple? The capital city was nothing like the northern villages. It was a world of crystal towers and golden light, of floating gardens and streets that hummed with energy. Millions of Velanthi lived there, more than Lyra had ever imagined existed. They stopped and stared as her ship flew past, whispering to each other, pointing at the windows. The palace stood at the center of everything, a mountain of white stone and blue glass that reached up toward the sky like a frozen flame. Lyra had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. They brought her inside. They washed her and dressed her in clothes softer than anything she had ever touched. They brushed her silver hair until it shone like starlight. They put jewels around her neck and rings on her fingers. And then they took her to meet her mother. The throne room was vast, so large that Lyra could not see the walls on either side. 1,000 nobles stood in silent rows, their golden eyes fixed on her as she walked down the long carpet toward the raised platform at the far end. On the platform sat a woman. She was the most beautiful person Lyra had ever seen. Her skin was pale lavender, exactly like Lyra's own. Her hair was silver, exactly like Lyra's own. Her face was proud and sad and fierce all at once. Empress Valeth. Beside the Empress stood a girl about Lyra's age. She looked almost exactly like Lyra, but her eyes were gold instead of silver. She wore a crown of tiny crystals that sparkled in the light. Princess Keela, Lyra's twin sister. Lyra stopped at the bottom of the steps. She did not know what to do. She did not know what to say. This was not her world. This was not her life. The Empress rose from her throne. Slowly, as if moving through water, she walked down the steps toward Lyra. Tears streamed down her perfect face. She stopped in front of Lyra and stared at her for a long moment. Then she fell to her knees and pulled Lyra into her arms. Lyra stood frozen. She could feel the Empress shaking against her. She could hear her whispering words of love and relief and sorrow in a voice thick with tears. But she felt nothing. This woman was a stranger. This palace was a prison. These people who bowed and smiled and called her princess were not her family. Her family was a human man with rough hands and a gentle voice. Her family was a small house in a cold village far from here. Her family was bedtime stories about blue skies and green forests and a world called Earth. When the Empress finally let her go, Lyra asked the only question that mattered. "Where is my papa?" The Empress's face changed. The joy drained away, replaced by something harder and colder. She told Lyra that the human had been arrested. She told her that he was a criminal who had stolen her away from her rightful home. She told her that he would face justice for his crimes. Lyra shook her head. "No," she said. "No, he saved me. He found me in the snow. I was dying, and he saved me. He is my father." The Empress's eyes grew sharp. She said that Daniel Cole was not Lyra's father. She said that Lyra's father had been the former emperor who had died 2 years after Lyra was born. She said that Daniel Cole was nothing but a primitive alien who had kept Lyra from her true destiny. Lyra pulled away from the Empress. Her small hands were shaking. Her silver eyes burned with a fire that startled everyone who saw it. She said that Daniel Cole was her papa. She said that he had loved her when no one else wanted her. She said that he had sung to her and told her stories and held her hand through every storm. She said that if they hurt him, she would never forgive them, any of them. The throne room went silent. 1,000 nobles held their breath. Even Princess Keela, who had never spoken to a human in her life, found herself staring at her strange twin sister with something like wonder. Empress Valeth looked at the child she had lost and found again. She saw the fire in those silver eyes, and she recognized it. It was her own fire, reflected back at her. For the first time in 12 years, the Empress did not know what to do. But Lyra knew exactly what she was going to do. She was going to save him, the same way he had saved her. And nothing in this empire was going to stop her. The imperial prison was carved deep into the rock beneath the capital city. No light reached its lowest levels. No sound escaped its walls. It was a place where the empire sent those it wanted to forget. Daniel Cole had lived in its darkest cell for 3 years. His hair had turned gray. His body had grown thin. The guards fed him enough to keep him alive, but barely. They did not speak to him. They did not answer his questions. They treated him like an animal, something less than Volanthi, something not worth their time or attention. But they had not broken him. Every night, Daniel closed his eyes and saw Lyra's face. He remembered her laughter, her silver eyes, the way she would climb into his lap and demand another story. He remembered the weight of her in his arms, as he carried her through the snow all those years ago. He did not know if she was alive. He did not know if she was safe. But he hoped. Hope was the only thing they could not take from him. When the guards came to tell him that his execution had been scheduled, Daniel was not surprised. He had always known this day would come. He had stolen a princess from the Empire. In their eyes, there was no greater crime. He asked them one question. Was the child safe? The guards laughed at him. They did not answer. Daniel spent his last days in silence, preparing himself for death. He had no regrets. He had saved a life. He had loved a child who needed love. Whatever happened next, no one could take that away from him. But far above him, in the golden halls of the palace, Lyra was fighting a war of her own. She refused to eat. She refused to sleep. She refused to attend the lessons they prepared for her, the ceremonies they arranged, the meetings with nobles who wanted to see the lost princess with their own eyes. She asked the same question every day, to everyone she met. Where is Daniel Cole? No one would tell her. She threw things. She screamed. She locked herself in her room and would not come out for days. The servants whispered about her. The nobles shook their heads and said that the human had damaged her, twisted her mind with his primitive ways. But Empress Valeth saw something different. She saw a child fighting for the person she loved. She saw strength and fire and a will that would not bend. She saw herself. The Empress began to ask questions of her own. She ordered the guards to bring her the reports from Daniel's capture. She read about how he had been found in the mountains, exhausted and starving, leading the scouts away from the temple. She read about how he had never asked for mercy, never tried to bargain, never spoken a single word against the child he had raised. She began to wonder if she had been wrong. Princess Keela also began to change. She had grown up hating humans. Her teachers had told her they were violent and stupid, barely better than animals. But the human her sister loved had not sounded violent or stupid. He had sounded kind. He had sounded like a father. Keela started visiting Lyra in her room. At first, Lyra would not talk to her. She saw Keela as part of the enemy, part of the empire that had taken her papa away. But Keela kept coming. She sat outside Lyra's door and talked to her through the wood. She asked about Daniel. She asked about the northern villages. She asked about the stories he used to tell. Slowly, Lyra began to answer. She told Keela about Earth, about blue skies and green forests, an ocean so big you could sail for days without seeing land. She told her about the songs Daniel used to sing, the games he used to play, the way he would hold her when she was scared of the dark. Kayla listened to every word, and somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing Daniel Cole as a criminal. She started seeing him as a person who had done something her own people could not do, love a child that the Empire had thrown away. Kayla went to her mother. She told the Empress that Lyra would never be happy in the palace. She told her that the lost princess would never accept her new life as long as her human father was in chains. She told her that keeping Daniel in prison was not justice. It was cruelty. The Empress listened. She did not speak for a long time. Finally, she asked Kayla what she thought they should do. Kayla said they should let Lyra see him. They should let her say goodbye, at least. They owed her that much. The Empress closed her eyes. She thought about the baby she had lost 12 years ago. She thought about the human who had found her in the snow and chosen to save her. She thought about all the years she had spent grieving, believing her daughter was dead, when all along she had been alive and loved and happy in a small house far from the palace. She made her decision. The execution was cancelled. Daniel Cole would be brought to the palace. Lyra would see him one more time. But the Empress did not know what would happen after that. She did not know if she could free him. She did not know if her people would accept it. She only knew that she could not let her daughter suffer any longer. A week later, Lyra was told that her papa was coming. She did not believe it at first. She had been lied to so many times. But Keela took her hand and promised that it was true. This time, no one was lying. Lyra spent the whole night unable to sleep. She walked circles around her room, her heart beating so fast it hurt. She practiced what she would say to him. She imagined running into his arms, the way she used to when she was small. When the morning came, she dressed herself in the finest clothes she had. She braided her silver hair the way Daniel had taught her. She looked at herself in the mirror and tried to be brave. Today she would see her father again. Today, everything would change. The great hall of the imperial palace had never been so full. Every noble family had sent representatives. Every general, every priest, every official of importance stood in careful rows beneath the crystal ceiling. Their golden eyes reflected the light of 1,000 floating lanterns, and their whispers filled the air like the sound of distant rain. They had come to see the human. Empress Valeth sat upon her throne at the far end of the hall. Her face showed nothing. Her silver hair was crowned with diamonds that caught the light and scattered it in all directions. Beside her stood Princess Keela, nervous and pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. And beside Keela stood Lyra. The lost princess wore no crown. She had refused it. She wore simple silver robes instead of the elaborate gowns the servants had offered her. Her silver eyes swept across the crowd, searching, waiting. The great doors opened. The crowd turned as one. Daniel Cole entered the hall between two imperial guards. His hands were bound in energy chains that glowed faint blue against his skin. His clothes were prison gray, torn and dirty from years of confinement. His hair was almost completely white now, and his face was thin and lined with exhaustion. But he walked with his head held high. His eyes looked straight ahead, meeting no one's gaze, focused on the throne at the end of the impossible distance before him. He did not see Lyra at first. There were too many people, too many faces, too much light after years of darkness. He squinted against the brightness and kept walking, one step at a time, ready to face whatever judgment waited for him. The crowd whispered as he passed. Some looked at him with disgust, some with curiosity. A few, very few, looked at him with something like pity. Daniel stopped at the foot of the throne. The guards forced him to his knees. He did not resist. He looked up at the Empress. She stared down at him with eyes that burned like cold fire. He could not read her face. He did not try. He was ready to die. He had been ready for a long time. And then he heard it. A small sound, a breath, a word that cut through the silence like a knife through silk. Papa. Daniel's head turned. His eyes searched the platform beside the throne, looking for the source of that impossible voice. He found her. She stood there like a vision from his dreams, taller than he remembered, older than he remembered. But her eyes were the same. Those silver eyes that he had looked into on the coldest night of his life, when he had held a dying baby against his chest and promised to protect her. Lyra. For a moment, the universe stopped. The crowd faded away. The Empress faded away. The chains on his wrists faded away. There was nothing in all of existence except his daughter and the impossible miracle of seeing her again. Lyra moved. She did not walk. She ran. She broke from her place beside the throne and flew down the steps, her silver robe streaming behind her, her feet barely touching the ground. The guards moved to stop her, but Kayla raised her hand and they froze in place. Lyra crashed into Daniel with enough force to knock him backward. Her arms wrapped around him so tight that he could barely breathe. Her face pressed into his chest, and he could feel her tears soaking through his worn shirt. "Mamá," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "SL, mother, it is him." 1,000 Velanthi held their breath, watching the scene before them with eyes full of wonder and confusion, and something they could not name. Empress Valeth rose from her throne. Every eye turned to her as she descended the steps. Her robes whispered against the stone. Her face was unreadable, a mask of imperial power that had not cracked in decades of rule. She stopped in front of Daniel and Lyra, mother and daughter, reunited, and between them the human who had made it all possible. Daniel looked up at her. He did not beg, he did not speak. He simply held his daughter, his bound hands resting on her back, and waited for whatever came next. The Empress studied him for a long time. She saw the gray in his hair, the lines on his face, the scars on his hands from years of work and survival. She saw the way Lyra clung to him, as if he were the only solid being in a world that kept trying to tear her apart. She saw a father. Slowly, gracefully, the Empress of the Velanthi Empire lowered herself to her knees. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. 100 years of tradition shattered in a single moment, as the most powerful being in the known galaxy knelt before a human prisoner. "You saved what I could not protect," the Empress said. Her voice carried through the silent hall, clear as crystal, steady as stone. "You gave her life when my people left her to die. You gave her love when I could not be there to give it myself. You gave her a home." She reached out and touched the chains on his wrists. With a soft click, they fell away. "From this day forward," she said, "Daniel Cole of Earth is no longer a prisoner. He is no longer a criminal. He is the guardian of the Silver Princess, protector of the royal bloodline, and a member of this family." She looked into his eyes. "Welcome home," she said. Lyra sobbed against Daniel's chest. Daniel held her tighter, tears streaming down his own face, unable to speak. Kayla stood on the steps above them, her golden eyes bright with tears she had never known she could cry. And somewhere in the crowd, an old Velanthi noble turned to the person beside him. "Perhaps we were wrong," he whispered, "about the humans." The other noble watched the scene before them. The Empress on her knees, the princess in her father's arms. The galaxy, changing in ways no one had ever expected. "Yes," they replied, "perhaps we were." The celebration lasted for 7 days. Daniel was given chambers in the palace, fine clothes, servants who bowed when he walked past. But he did not care about any of it. He cared only about Lyra, who refused to leave his side for even a moment. They sat together in the palace gardens, beneath trees that glowed with inner light. Daniel told her new stories, stories he had saved for this moment, stories he had been afraid he would never get to share. Lyra listened to every word, her head resting against his shoulder, her silver eyes watching the strange stars of this alien sky. "Papa," she said softly, "tell me about the ocean again." Daniel smiled. He pulled her close, and he began to tell the story, just as he had done on 1,000 cold nights in a small house far from here, when she was small, and he was all she had. Because that is what fathers do.